When thinking back to the many entries in the Scooby-Doo franchise, one that's often stood out to me is the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo. As I mentioned in my video about Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, while that made a big deal about the monsters being real and not people in costumes, it was not the first time that Great Dane and his friends encountered them, and I do remember catching reruns of 13 Ghosts. Revisiting the show, I do think it's one of the better entries in the franchise. This might not be too surprising when seeing the principal talent involved in its creation. The concept for the series came from Mitch Shower, who would later create The Angry Beavers, one of my favorite Nickelodeon shows. The story editor is Tom Ruegger, who would then create a puppet named Scooby-Doo, but would of course become most well known for Warner Brothers cartoons like Animaniacs and Tiny Toon Adventures. The hope with 13 Ghosts was to possibly spruce up the franchise and take it in a new direction. Not only are the ghosts and monsters real, but the show had a running narrative of the heroes trying to return the titular ghost to the chest of demons after Scooby and Shaggy are tricked into opening it and unleashing them. I think that did add a certain urgency, knowing things would not immediately return to status quo, and Scooby's job was not done yet. Now, I don't know if the general consensus among the Scooby fanbase is whether it's better to have monsters be real, or if they tend to prefer people in costumes. But I admit I do find it a bit more interesting when the monsters are real. Not say the people in costumes cannot be done well. Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated have both costume people and real monsters, and I really like that show. But even early in the franchise's history, I think some of the folks at Hanna-Barbera recognized the need to not just give people the same scenario again and again, despite being a studio known for their formulas and repeating storylines. This even seemed to apply to which characters would appear on the show. Fred and Velma are absent from 13 Ghosts, with only Daphne sticking around. Daphne mostly exists as a straight woman to react to the comical antics of her co-stars and provide a more level-headed response to the ghosts and how to stop them. Scrappy-Doo was already part of the gang at that point, much to the irritation of many viewers, although for this show his more annoying tendencies were thankfully toned down. Instead they were given to Flimflam. A child with con artist tendencies, this was a frustrating character. As well, he was helpful a few times. There were also moments when he made the situation worse. Tom Ruegger later revealed in interviews that he hated Flimflam, and that the character primarily existed because ABC thought the show needed a child for the target audience to relate to. Although how many children watched Scooby-Doo Where Are You and sat there thinking someone their age should tag along on the mystery? Not to mention there was already a younger character with Scrappy, so Flimflam just seemed a little redundant. Shower and Ruegger tried to make the character a bit more interesting and fun by having him constantly try to con people, but ultimately admitted he became a bit of a nuisance. One of the high points of the show came from Vincent Van Ghoul, voiced by Vincent Price. The character was heavily modeled after Price, and he was a delightful presence. Although a funny aspect of Vincent is that while he would prove helpful on a number of occasions, there were episodes where he just stayed home and told the gang to handle the situation themselves. There's even an episode where he's in bed a lot of the time, while everyone else gets whisked into an adventure. 13 Ghosts was heavily inspired by monster movies, and so bringing someone known for his appearances in Roger Corman horror movies was a logical choice. Often causing trouble for the characters, and the reason the chest was opened, were the ghosts, Bogle and Weird. Although they had their own comedic mishaps on occasions, they tried to get rid of Scooby and Shaggy. While the main villains, they were not in every episode, and only came in when they would bring something to the story. What was nice about the show is that each monster that came out the chest felt distinct, with their own specific abilities that would prove a challenge for the heroes. Each monster has a different evil plot they want to unleash onto the world, and will go through different lengths to try to accomplish their goals. The writers additionally placed the gang in a variety of locations that fit the monsters. So there's an episode on a ghost ship, and another in a warlock convention where an enchantress tries to drain their powers, even almost causing Vincent to marry her. The designs of the ghosts and monsters also stood out, ranging from homages to classic monsters to entirely new creations. They managed to walk that thin line of being appropriately ghoulish and a threat to the main characters, without becoming too scary for the target audience. Not that stops certain groups from accusing the show of promoting witchcraft and the occult. Stopping the villains usually involved a lot of cunning on the part of the characters. Yes, while Shaggy and Scooby were the ones who unleashed the 13 Ghosts, they at least recognized their responsibility and the need to get them back in. Although, of course, their frightful tendencies still came through plenty of times, along with their appetites. Shaggy and Scooby also utilized their typical method of pretending to be other people in order to distract the monsters, as would Flimflam, Scrappy, and sometimes Daphne. There is one crazy revelation about Shaggy in the show, when it's revealed that he somehow has a pilot's license and knows how to fly an airplane. Apparently, when he was not just sitting in the back of the mystery machine or going into haunted houses, he was attending flight school. Who knew? One of the main things that stands out about the series is the amount of fourth wall breaking jokes. There's an episode where the gang finds themselves inside of a classic monster movie with the title The Son of the Bride of the Ghost of Frankenstein, which plays into the various tropes of the Universal movies. There's another one where Scooby has enough and quits, which leads to them holding auditions for a new dog sidekick. And then it's revealed that 13 Ghosts is a television show that people are actually watching in-universe, who then get upset that the main star of the show is gone and replaced with a canine they deem inferior. President Reagan even gets in on the act. These two episodes were among the ones that Tom Ruegger served as a principal writer, and you can definitely spot his fingerprints. Another episode he co-wrote in this vein has the characters transported into newspaper comic strips. They end up in parodies of comics like BC, The Wizard of Id, Flash Gordon, and Pogo. That last one is especially notable because they meet a character named Platypus Duck, who Ruegger originally created for his student film, so it's neat they then got the opportunity to use him on this show. Ruegger's name even appears on screen as the creator of Platypus Duck when they're sucked into the strip. There are other examples of fourth wall breaking, like when the characters interrupt the show to deliver a news report, with Scrappy doing interviews on the street to comment on the show's events. But between the comedy bits, there were actual stakes on the show, with the monsters causing some real damage at times. There's an episode where Vincent is turned to stone, which the gang has to try and reverse. Another episode reveals an alternate future caused by not stopping a villain with the ability to control time. While there are also times when the problems are caused by the heroes themselves being clumsy, with Flimflam often being a culprit. There was a fitting atmosphere to the show that made it a suitable watch for the Halloween season, which is when I often recall the show being rerun. Even though the team behind the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo was hoping to produce a second season, ABC decided to cancel the show. As a result, the story was left incomplete, as they had not trapped all the ghosts. Later series seemed to largely ignore the events of 13 Ghosts, including Flimflam disappearing and never to be heard from again. Eventually, Mystery Incorporated revealed that Flimflam was serving a 25-year prison sentence. Sure, he was a bit of a scoundrel and kind of annoying, but that's a little harsh. Vincent Van Ghoul would also appear on the show, voiced by Maurice LaMarche, doing an excellent Vincent Price impression, although on that series, he's a horror movie actor instead of an actual warlock. Finally, in 2019, a new direct-to-video movie was released that sought to finally capture the final ghost. Titled Scooby-Doo and the Curse of the 13th Ghost, I did find this to be an amusing and enjoyable way to reveal what happened to the final ghost. In addition to Vincent, we get to see a grown-up Flimflam who's a lot more tolerable this time around, and it's also fun hearing Fred and Velma find out about this escapade. I've found Fred has become one of my favorite characters in recent Scooby media, as he's often given the funniest lines, and him dealing with not being the leader in this specific adventure allows for some good moments. The absence of Bogle and Weird is strange though, considering they were the reason the ghosts were unleashed in the first place, and so you would think they would be trying to keep a watchful eye on the chest all these years later. Throughout the story, Velma is her usual skeptical self, with some viewers feeling the movie was attempting to retcon the events of the show as not being supernatural. However, while Velma theorizes this, the film does not outright say this. Velma even almost opens the chest of demons, but decides not to, so it's entirely possible, yes, the ghosts and monsters are real. But as for the original 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo, I do think it's one of the most charming entries in the Scooby-Doo franchise that was willing to try different things and provide viewers with a spooky good time whenever they tuned in each Saturday morning. See you next time.